Okay, it is 11 o'clock. Hi, everyone. I am Sarah Vanderwald. I am a board member of the Plan Giving Council of the Mid-South. We are so happy to have you. Today we have Lindsay Jones, who is our treasurer of the Plan Giving Council. We have Joey Maruzzi, who is the president of the Plan Giving Council, and Leslie Davidson, another board member. And we are very happy to have them be our plan giving experts for today. If anyone has any questions, we have enabled the chat function and you are able to chat with any of the panelists. Again, my name is Sarah Vanderwald, so I'm the moderator for today. Any technical questions, please send to me. Any plan giving questions you may send to me and I will funnel them throughout the presentation today. So a little bit of a background on everybody who is here with us on the panel that you see. Lindsay Jones, who is an attorney at Wiseman Bray, and she focuses on estate planning, post-death administration, asset protection planning, and charitable plan giving. We have Leslie Davidson, who is the senior philanthropic advisor at ALSAC St. Jude, and Joey Maruzzi, who is development coordinator at Methodist Healthcare, and I apologize if I keep saying Joey's name. If there are no questions in the chat, I'm going to check right now. We will get started. Okay, Lindsay, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, good. All right, good morning, everyone. Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so first I wanted to just kind of run through, as most of y'all probably know, this is a two-day, we've got today, a couple hours set aside, and then we also have the second day that some of our other board members are working on, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. So today we are going to really go back to the basics for those of you who may be in organizations that don't have a significant plan giving program, or may have just a couple of people who are trying to start a plan giving program. We thought it would be helpful to sort of go back to the basics, and we're going to talk about what a planned gift is, why you should have a plan giving program if you do not already, or if you do already, why that's beneficial for your organization. Then we'll take a shift to institutional readiness to determine and help you determine if your organization is ready for a plan giving program, or if you already have a plan giving program, how you can improve on that. And then we will wrap up with a little bit of, kind of current issues and how that's affected plan giving during the pandemic. And then you can see on the agenda, the second day will be kind of A to Z, the life of a plan gift. We'll go more specific into the types of plan gifts, what you can do to secure those gifts, maintain those gifts, marketing and stewardship, and then finally working with professional advisors. One of the things that has been very helpful to me, and I think to some of our other board members and regular members, has been having this collaboration of advisors, so that if something comes up, be it a technical question, or if I have a question, hey, how do I get this gift to your organization that I might find in somebody's will or something like that. It's always helpful to have people that and can call upon to help answer those questions. And so that's been a significant benefit of this organization, and I would encourage each of you, as you have questions, obviously ask those, but also, and I tell advisors this all the time, be it financial advisors or plan giving professionals, please feel free to use me as a resource. If you have a legal question, I will do my best to either get you an answer or put you in touch with somebody who can. And then on the flip side, some of our plan giving professionals who are with nonprofit organizations, I can call them as well. So please feel free to use them as a resource for your organization as well. So with that, we will get started with the definition of a plan gift. And on this first slide, it's okay. Gotcha. So on this first slide, we talk about definition of a plan gift. I think when we hear the term plan gift, we maybe have this association with it that it has to be a large gift, or it has to be plan gifts are only made by wealthy people, and they're only made at the end of life. And while those things can fall in the definition of a planned gift, those are not always the things. So I encourage you to think of planned gift as a larger, more inclusive term, because it can include gifts during lifetime. And then also, you know, I tell people wealthy is really a matter of perspective. So what might be a large gift for one organization might be a very small gift for another organization. And so, you know, how wealthy or not the person is may or may not impact the gift that they want to give you. And, you know, one example I use related to this, that I had a client a few years ago who lived next door to her church, and she wanted to leave her home to her church so that they could use it for, they had a growing youth and college ministry. And so she wouldn't consider herself wealthy. She had some other assets, but I wouldn't call her wealthy, you know, as we tend to think of that word. But what she had to give to that church was very significant, because it saved them, one, you know, construction costs and all of that to build a separate place. It was right next door to the church, so it allowed for you know, some continuity, but also a little bit of separation for the youth and the college ministry. And so, you know, I think that certainly falls within the definition of a planned gift. And as we'll talk about in just a minute, it just so happened initially when she came to me, she said she wanted to leave her house to the church at her death, and then her circumstances changed. She moved into a retirement community a few years later. And so she came back and said, you know, I might as well go ahead and give this to the church. Do you think that's a good idea? So I think when we think about what a planned gift is, it can be a lot broader than what we often think about. So we've got a couple of quotes on the next slide that sort of better encompasses, I think, this idea. And it says, any gift of any amount given for any purpose for current or deferred use, which requires the assistance of various advisors and may include estate and financial planning issues. So that's a quote from Robert Sharp. And I think it makes us think that it is broader than potentially, you know, what we might jump to think as, oh, a planned gift has to be a, you know, multi-million-dollar gift for a building or something like that. And then the second quote on here, the complementary fundraising activity, which helps individuals with charitable intent make the largest gift possible with the right asset in the most advantageous form and at the most appropriate time. Again, it's not always the end of life. The most appropriate time is not always in somebody's will. It's not always in a trust. It's not always a charitable gift annuity. It might be a beneficiary designation on a retirement account. It might be a lifetime gift. It might be a combination of those things. So I would encourage you, as we're talking through, you know, planned gifts and having a planned giving program, to think of it in a broader way than potentially that you have in the future. Okay, so switching to why have a planned giving program at all? Presumably, if you're on this call, you're somewhat involved in a nonprofit organization that may have a planned giving program, but for sure has some mechanism for fundraising. So it may be you're raising money already, and so the question becomes, how do we convert that then to a planned giving program where we're not just fundraising for a particular project or, you know, annual fundraising goals and things like that, but we're really looking more long term. And so we kind of look at the question of why have a planned giving program. So the statistics say that only around a little over 40% of Americans have a will. Okay, so generally that's not that many, and that's not, I see that in my practice all the time. So I have wealthy clients who come to me that don't ever have a will. They have a very successful business and they're so busy running their business and dealing with that a will is just not something that they've you know, done or really thought about. I think everybody thinks I need a will, but it's something that's easy to defer. And it's usually easy to defer until something happens, either a death of a family member or something happens to sort of trigger you, oh, it might be a good time to do this. I think people think of estate planning and wills only for the elderly. And, unfortunately, I've had several cases, 3 cases in the last 3 or 4 weeks that involve the death of somebody between the ages of 40 and 45. So I would encourage you to kind of look beyond thinking about estate planning and wills as only for, wealthy old people. So of that 40% that has a will, only 9% has included charities. So that's not a great statistic necessarily. However, once charities are included, in almost all cases, charities continue to be included in later changes or revisions, to those documents. Now, that doesn't necessarily say, did they change from one charity to another? Did they change the amount that went to the charity? It just says that of those people who include charities, they're more likely to continue to include charities in some way. So my takeaway from that is, if you are a charity and you are fortunate enough to be included in somebody's will, then it's really up to you to continue to steward that donor if you know that your organization is included in the will, because they're probably going to keep charities in their will in some fashion, and you want to make sure that if your organization is already included, that it remains included. I can't tell you how many times I have a client come in, for an update, let's say 10 years after they did their last estate planning documents. And let's say we had 25% of the estate going to 5 different charities. And they say, well, I've, become less involved with charity A, so let's take them out and let's give 10% to charity B instead of, so they're changing around. And a lot of that is based on the amount of connection they feel to the organization, which gives you a great opportunity in sort of stewarding your donors and making sure that, one, they're thinking about you when they, sit down to think about who their beneficiaries are. And that, two, once they are included, that you continue to make sure that your organization is top of their mind. And then you'll see, there's an expected almost $60 trillion in wealth transfer over the next 40 to 50 years. And that's, the aging of the baby boomers. That generation is typically much better at saving than some of the younger generations. And so for those of us that are in planning, this is a huge opportunity, one, to educate our clients and our donors, and two, to start the process of asking. So again, sort of looking at that big wealth transfer, that is a very, very significant transfer of money. And then you'll see that second that second bullet point under the $59 trillion transfer, $5.6 trillion in estate taxes. So even though the estate tax landscape has changed dramatically over the last 10 years, there is still a significant amount of estate tax to be paid. Again, not to mention the fact that the estate tax is very politically motivated. So any change in either presidential administration or significant change in the makeup of Congress could result in a change in that, what that estate tax landscape looks like. So looking at taxes, on our next slide, I always tell people, this is an ever-changing landscape. Right now, we have except for 1 year where we had no estate tax, we have historically high estate tax exemption amounts. So that means that the vast majority of your donors and your clients are not going to be subject to the estate tax. Currently, less than 1/3% of all estates across the country will be subject to estate taxes. And the current exemption per person is almost $11.6 million. So for a married couple, that's over $23 million. So I'm sure you can imagine there's not, less than 1/3% of the population is actually going to be subject to that. However, of those estates that are subject to estate taxes, it's a 40% tax, and all of the money that is subject to that tax has been taxed before in some form or fashion. So income taxes, capital gains, all of those kinds of things. So taxable estates are still a significant source of revenue for the IRS, and certainly you still have the opportunity where clients who might otherwise be paying estate taxes might instead give to your organization in an attempt to offset or defray those taxes, specifically clients that already have are charitably inclined and are fans of your organization. So from a state inheritance tax perspective, most states, including Tennessee, have eliminated any separate state inheritance or death tax. There are, I haven't checked recently, I think there's about 10 across the country that still have some kind of state level death tax, but most states are moving away from a separate state inheritance tax, which means that if the majority of people are not going to be paying estate tax, we've had a shift over the last several years, and our planning has become much more focused on income tax, what strategies that we can use to help eliminate or reduce income taxes more than it has estate taxes. So if you're in plan giving, we want to think about, well, how can we benefit from that shift in focus? So it used to be, for example, that a lot of my clients were worried about getting assets out of their estate for estate tax purposes because they didn't want to have, their heirs to have to pay estate taxes at their death. Well, now a lot of clients, we want to focus on keeping those assets in the estate in order to get a stepped up tax basis. So the sort of classic example of this would be the family farm. It used to be that we might want to get the family farm out of the estate for estate tax purposes, but now we might want to keep it in the estate in order to get that stepped up tax basis. And so I encourage you, as you're thinking about plan giving, to think about, how certain strategies can impact and potentially assist your organization. One of the easiest ways that a person who is over 70 and a half can benefit the charities that they like is by doing a direct IRA rollover for some portion of their RMD or all of their RMD, depending on the amount. RMDs are income taxable to the beneficiary. They have to come out starting, I said 70 and a half, now it's 72, so I apologize. That changed earlier this year. But the majority of your older clients are going to have to take RMDs, and if they're already supporting your organization, they can instead of taking their RMD and then turning around and making a gift to your organization, they can instead just give that directly to your organization and bypass, all income tax consequences associated with that required minimum distribution. So that's just one way, but I encourage you to think about, we want to be a little more creative as far as how can certain, a changing landscape and what happens with taxes impact how we can facilitate gifts where clients aren't thinking, oh, I have to write a check for X number of dollars. All right. So we talked a little bit about, why does your organization need a plan gift? And I would say the main thing is the long-term stability of the organization. And for many organizations, this is the primary, if not the only way to grow your endowment. So you have, again, certain annual fundraising goals, certain capital campaigns associated potentially with a particular project. But if we're really going to have a successful, long-term, stable organization then planned gifts are an integral part of that, because they're going to provide not just our short-term needs for our organization, but they're going to provide those longer-term needs as well. I think, one of the things that I was talking to Joey and Leslie about sort of in preparation for this is the impact of the pandemic on colleges, especially smaller colleges, smaller private colleges, because so many of those are either exclusively online or, a lot of restrictions. And so in some cases, enrollment is down. But more importantly, a lot of those organizations are losing so much money because they don't have students on campus. And so, the more of an endowment that you have built up, the more likely that college is to be able to sustain a period like this, where there's not as much tuition coming in because, enrollment is down, or, we're paying for these buildings, but no one's living in them because nobody can live on campus. And so there are just a lot of things. That's one example that comes to mind as far as just kind of recently that's come up, that a lot of these organizations are really struggling with, either, decreased donations because of financial hardship of potential donors, or in the case of these colleges, they don't have as much coming in the door and their expenses are still the same. So we really want to think about planned gifts as an important way to maintain the viability of the organization for the long term and to grow the endowment. All right, so again, continuing that discussion of why have a planned giving program, the first note here says everyone's doing it, but in reality, that's really true. So colleges, animal rescue organizations, your church, private schools, all of those types of things. And you have to let people know that you can and will accept their deferred gifts. My children go to Briarcrest, and I get, I feel like I get the emails certainly weekly about how to, here's different ways you can give. So there's the annual giving campaign, and then there's the, consider Briarcrest in your will, and consider the potential or consider all the great things that Briarcrest has done for your family, and, all of those kinds of things. So one of the things is your donors are going to be expecting this, especially if they have other organizations that they're a part of. And so one, you want to make sure you're doing it to keep up with those. But the other is you want to let them know that your organization is ready and willing to accept not just, a check for today, but also, a planned gift for the longer term. And there is a huge potential. One large planned gift can really change the dynamic of, what a particular project looks like or what your organization looks like. And it is an excellent return on your investment. And again, sort of getting out of that mindset of writing a check to an organization, less than 5% of the country's wealth is in cash. So we want to be actively considering how we can build a planned giving program, how we can accept planned gifts, and how that can be very beneficial for our organization. And then, I like this next one. I tell clients this all the time. So a lot of clients are like, when we're having this discussion, we'll say, well, if I die, then I want this. And I don't always say this, but in certain circumstances, I will say, well, really, it's not if you die, it's when you die, because certainly death is inevitable. You can't take the money with you, and you may have a desire to leave a legacy beyond just, with your family and or with organizations that you support. So the intersection of those three things is where we can really get some traction for a planned giving program. I'm getting ready to turn it over to Joey and Leslie. Certainly, if we have any questions at this point, I'm happy to answer those, or we can sort of transition into kind of how your organization can be prepared or to begin a plan giving program.
I do not see any questions in the chat, but if you have questions, you can click on the chat function and do all panelists. That should be one of your options, and I will be reading those as we go. So feel free to type any questions that you have as you think of them.
One thing to piggyback on with Lindsay's previous slide on the 5% of the nation's wealth being available in cash, every nonprofit in the country is after that 5%. And the bulk of their money is in retirement accounts, stocks, basically a wide range portfolio. So for those of you working in major gifts, everyone's dipping into that 5%, and that other 95% is what plan giving, what we're trying to do and emphasize here. So why go after that 5% when, I mean, and clearly we all want to, but that other 95% is such a big bucket and such a big opportunity, and really what these two programs are going to emphasize for you guys. Leslie, go ahead and jump in. Sorry to cut you off there.
That's okay. All of it's so important. It is such an honor for us to be with you today, and just so thrilled to see all of the various organizations that are on this call. I took some time yesterday to look at your websites, and was just thrilled to see that every one of our websites are focusing on our mission. I mean, the first thing you see when you go to a website is what we do, why we do it, and how important it is. Our donors need to know that they are investing, no matter if it's a monthly gift, it's a yearly gift, a special gift, a campaign gift, or certainly a planned gift. They need to know what they're supporting and why. Development, I believe, is one of the most noble professions. We have the honor of helping our donors, connecting them to missions that are important, saving lives, the arts and sciences, healthcare, research, just feeding people. I mean, basic needs, housing. It's so important for these missions to stay viable. And I think it's interesting for us that the Plan Giving Council, which has been around since either 91 or 92, 1991, 1992, has been a source for you, everyone on this call, our members and members throughout the years, to actually find that group of people. Lindsay mentioned it, Joey will mention it throughout this meeting. We're here for you. And so I did want to mention that on the first slide. The last thing that was very important to me was to write your mission on your heart and always share it with passion, because that is what ignites the passion in your donors. And as we continue to go through this mission moment, how frequently when we talk about our donors, and these are donors who are, they're actually prospects that we're actually looking at for planned gifts, or they may be donors who've already told us about a planned gift. If you already know them and you have a pattern of contact with them, it could be 4 times a year. Certainly we want to contact them on their birthday. I've already made a couple of calls today to birthday donors. I try to focus on every special occasion that's coming up. Some of these donors are older, and special handwritten notes mean everything to them. what are the best ways to facilitate the discussion with your donor? I think we look for ways to bring it up. We actually listen to our donors and what are their problems. I really wish I could do more for your organization. I need a steady income or a guaranteed income. I have a farm that I don't use. I wonder if your organization might be interested in it. I have, what will I do with my estate? I don't have any children. There are all kinds of problems that our donors have, and gift planning allows us to help them, whether they're gifts that are made during lifetime, that Lindsay mentioned, or gifts made at death. Leaving a legacy is greater than wealth. Looking at our at donors who are, one of the problems they always say is, I'm concerned about leaving my estate to my children. I don't want people to spend through all of the hard-earned, the business that I've had, and we learned that 60% of inherited wealth is lost by the end of the second generation. 90% can be lost by the third generation. So I think it's very important to make sure that we focus on helping them and involving their family in the giving as well. Joey, do you have something to add to this?
No, I don't think so. It's really important just to be, for all of us that interact with our donors, just to pay attention to the cues and know what they're saying and how they're saying it. Lindsay and all of the estate planning attorneys in our area will tell you that so many people are updating their documents right now. The pandemic has kind of provided an outlet and made everyone, it's another major life event. And it's created some uneasiness for a lot of folks. And you know, when you sit down and you hear those cues, oh, I met with my financial advisor, oh, I updated my estate planning attorney. It's a great opportunity if you have that relationship and a really strong relationship with that donor to go ahead and step in and say, well, have you considered leaving a gift in your estate to us at the Orpheum, to us at the Dixon? Because 99% of the time when they talk about it, they're comfortable enough to have that discussion with you, and it really is the door opener.
Joey, I'm going to jump in. We have a question from Donna about how do you know if a donor left a portion of their will to your organization? If you've had those conversations, and this, Lindsay, also, you know, from an attorney perspective, I don't know if you want to address this now or save it to the end.
Well, I can certainly address it from my end. When I have a client who, you know, is leaving something in their will or trust to a charitable organization, I always encourage the client to reach out to the organization and let them know, because I always tell people, if you don't decide how your assets are going to be used by that organization, someone will. And presumably, while I'm still alive, is when I want to be telling that organization, hey, I'm leaving you this, and here's what I foresee with that money. After somebody's death, I don't know what they foresaw with that money, and your organization may not know either. So from my perspective, I really encourage you know, clients, I can't disclose it to the organization unless they give me permission to, but I try to always encourage my clients to do that. And then I would say from a, you know, organization, what I get back in return is, oh, well, I'm supposed to have lunch with, you know, Leslie next week. And I said, well, you know, that would be a great time to talk with her about that. So I think the more in touch your donors are with the plan giving advisors, the more likely they are to feel comfortable sort of sharing that gift.
Yeah, and on our end, Donna, it's really up in the air. You know, I would say that a small percentage will come out and tell you. More times than most, that conversation is going to be more fluid, and it's a long journey. It's not a major gift ask where, you know, you sit down with somebody for coffee to learn about their philanthropic goals, and then the next time you see them, you put a proposal in front of them. This is a time investment of the organization and the staff to really get to know, and you're on their timeline ultimately. And sometimes they don't tell you what you're getting or the amount. The only thing that you know is that you're in there, and you do the absolute best job stewarding them that you can until that gift comes around.
Great. Okay, Joey. Relationship building.
So, you know, what we do is because of our staff and our donors. I would not be able to raise money for Methodist. Leslie would not be able to raise money for ALSAC if it were not for the great work that our people are doing and the donors that we are here in the middle kind of relaying that information to. So just always consider that, you know, being donor centric is not just important for your annual donors and your major donors, but on the plan giving side as well. It's so important. So we covered the why. We're going to jump into some of the bigger pieces now on how to get everything in place. And institutional readiness is a big part. All of these pieces should be in place already with your organization. Your mission is something that you speak to daily. It's that elevator pitch that, you know, when you meet someone that doesn't know anything about church health, you jump in and you say, oh, this is what we do in the community, and this is why I'm passionate about it, and, you know, would love to take you and show you our facilities and give you a tour. Your policies that are in place, your budget that all of us are involved in every year, and staff. A lot of the organizations on the call today, you guys are small shops. You have an executive director, a development director, and maybe a marketing person. But for the most part, you all wear so many hats. And this plan giving piece is really, these two programs are meant to build this skill set into your toolbox so that you can be aware and look out for the opportunities for deferred gifts of any sort. Leslie, do you have anything to add?
Great job. So what needs to be in place? We need a history of support. In looking at the organizations, most of everybody on the call, you've been around for a while. You've had decades of action in the community. You've accomplished things. You actually have donors who are on your file, and we want to look at those donors, and we want to see who are the best people for plan giving. Again, we talked about mission. I actually saw one organization has its entire strategic plan on their website, which I thought was pretty impressive. We want a board who is highly involved, very involved with our organization. We want them to give and support and also do a planned gift. We want them to be investors as well, and we expect that. That's one of the expectations that we should have. We want to educate them, because the more they know about what plan giving is, and the various assets that we can accept, the more they can utilize their influence and their encouragement for other donors and friends that they have. Prospect identification, we want to look at donors that are ideally 55 years and older. There was another organization that actually had a breakdown of what you do at various levels of your life, starting at 45 to 55, 55 to 65, and then 65 to 75 and older. And they looked at the various types of gifts, the things that you're dealing with. And I thought that was really interesting. But we're looking at older people for the most part when we're looking for bequest, and I think that's one of the plan giving tools that Joey and I focused on. Ideally, if you're looking for major gifts, it might be someone who's younger, but for the ultimate gift, we're looking for an older donor. I would work my way down in my file and actually look for the oldest donors first. We've got promotion, marketing, education. We're getting ready to cover those. And then Joey's going to talk a lot about recognition societies, which are so critical. Here we are at how many donors. Some have said that you need 100 donors who have given to you every year for 3 years, or at least 1,000 donors who are over the age of 50. If you're starting out with a plan giving program, you really, for me, the way that I've always been taught to identify donors is those donors who have been on your file for the longest time, who have been consistent supporters, and those who are the right age. And what I love I got to work at the University of Memphis for several years, and our universities, any of our educational systems, or our, and some religious organizations, but anyone who deals with someone who has to fill out a form, like our Methodist hospital, you have the date of birth of your donors. And so you can easily go in and find out how old they are, how long they've been on your file as a donor, how many gifts have they made. We don't care if they're large gifts. We don't care about that part. That's not the important part. It's recency, frequency, and length of time on the file coupled with age. Moves management is a term that has been around since the major gift days. I believe Dave Dunlop at Cornell, who was one of the greatest fundraisers of all time. I think he raised something like $500 million for them. And he actually developed moves management, and it was quite simply looking at the prospects that he had and creating an interaction that would occur sometime in the future that would move that prospect along in their development. And just for example, I have had a donor I worked with in the 1990s, and his wife had a birthday, and the first gift they made was a gift in honor of her birthday, and they wanted to come, and she wanted to give the check to someone at St. Jude. So I happened to be the person that got to be there for that. And then he mentioned that he had a company. That, and I started following up with them, and I looked back because 1 year later they made $1 million gift. I had made 50 interactions, cards, calls, articles, not asking for the gift, always just planting seeds about what was our mission and how to move them forward. in their love and their passion of our mission. And so it really moves our interactions, and they're wonderful, thoughtful gestures on your part that you do because you love someone and they care about your organization, and it helps to endear them to you and create a strong bond. Let me see if I have anything else. I think that's all I have, Joey.
Perfect. So again, guys, these pieces that need to be in place more than likely are on your share drive or posted around your office. Your mission, you preach to your donors, to your constituency, your board. Your strategic plan, on the other hand, it's a vision of your future. It can be such a powerful document when working with a plan giving prospect, because they know what your vision is for the future and how their dollars will be used down the road. I mean, it's just, if it's not something you already have, do work on that and sit down with your board and your staff to develop a really focused strategic plan that outlines those goals for your future. Leslie, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I did see in looking at websites, I believe I may have mentioned this, but I did see an organization that actually shared their strategic plan on their website, and they shared their gift policies as well, because they wanted the donors who visited the website to know what their vision was, and also to know the types of gifts that have to be considered by them before acceptance. And I thought that was really forward thinking on their part. And I just saw a question.
Leslie, I was going to follow up with that. Yeah.
Okay.
So you were mentioning, contacting donors, sending cards, just, planting seeds. And so a question that Anne has is, what if you don't know the donor well? What examples can you give to sort of build that relationship, if you don't know their birthday or you don't know what their interests are, but you do want to cultivate that relationship?
So I had something like this happen yesterday. Actually, had a donor, we've been given a certain number of donors to look at that have not been had a lot of contact with us. They're steady donors. They're not necessarily, and Joey and I talked about this, we're not looking necessarily for donors that are making the largest gifts to your institutions. These are everyday people. They're really basic donors. And so this donor had not made really large gifts, but I did note, and I was very fortunate that I saw a note on the file about their business. So I called and left a message and said, I'd love to meet, I'd love to talk with you. I wanted to introduce myself and would just like to share some information about St. Jude with you. And I mentioned where they lived, their city and state, and I thanked them for the number of years they had been giving. And he called me back and was just sharing with me about his business, and I asked for permission to get his email address and to follow up with him and to begin to share some stories with him via email. And I said, I will send you a note with my card, and I have the honor of thanking our donors who give to St. Jude, and I would love to be able to share some things with you in person, when the pandemic is not active. So I think even if you have not had a lot of contact with your donor and you don't know who they are, introducing yourself to them as the representative for your organization is such an opportunity to open up some doors. Will all of them open up? No. I've probably put out 20 or 30 of these recently. and I've gotten maybe 3 people that followed up. And so it's not a win-win every time, but it's a start. And I think I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, well, gosh, I give them at least 5 tries, leaving messages. Joey's probably got some ideas too.
Yeah, it's really what's best for the donor, and like in major gift work or your annual donors, getting to know what their preference is. I have donors that don't like phone calls. They would rather get an email checking in or a text message with an update on a program. All of my Plain Giving donors, I try to see in person twice a year. This year's been challenging with that because so many of our Plain Giving donors are older and they are at risk. So certainly, every senior living community in the city is not allowing visitors right now. So it's a great opportunity for stewardship for all of us in the nonprofit sector. Stewardship and cultivation is the bulk of what I think we should all be doing right now. Because there's people that have fallen off the radar, like Leslie said. There's donors giving $5 a quarter to the Salvation Army that might not get a personalized phone call normally, but right now they need to be. And it's a great opportunity for everyone in your office to make phone calls. Just say thank you. But you learn more over time, I think, and personal visits really provide a great opportunity to pick up things as far as family and pets and what's important to them. And Leslie will speak to that a little later on.
Thank you.
And I think, but just kind of from my perspective, the way that I learn about my clients, I usually spend the first hour of an initial meeting, maybe 45 minutes, depending on finding out about the client, their family. And I always find, that the first 10, 15, 20 minutes, they're very hesitant. They'll say, I have 3 kids, Bob, Sally, and Joe, blah, blah, blah. And then I'll be like, well, tell me about Joe. Do you have a good relationship? Where does he live? All of those kinds of things. And I think that can translate to you realize pretty quickly where people are more likely to share information, whether that's a phone call. Like I have older clients who I can send them 1 million emails and they hardly know how to turn on their computer, much less open an email. So that's probably not a good way to touch them. I have tons of clients right now who are in senior living facilities who can't get out. I can't go in. But when I call them on the phone, they won't let me go for an hour. They don't really have anything to do, necessarily any changes for their estate plan, but they're starving for someone to talk to other than the 5 people they see, each day, which is probably a staff member, maybe a caregiver, and those kinds of things. So I would encourage all of you, especially with this pandemic, to be persistent and to keep in mind that, one of the major, fallout, so to speak, of the pandemic is this feeling of isolation. And that's even more so, for older clients who are potentially your prospective donors, that they want somebody who's interested in talking to them. Maybe, it doesn't start as you're interested in, learning about, but it just develops through that conversation. So of how are you doing? How have things changed, for you with the pandemic? Well, here's some things that have happened at my organization that, we're really talking through. And so everybody can relate to that. Everybody can relate to some of the frustrations of the pandemic. And so it doesn't necessarily have to start with, here's what's great about St. Jude. There are tons of things that are great about St. Jude, but part of it can just be, how are you? How are things going? How have you been impacted? And those kinds of things.
Very good points, Lindsay. So a question came in from Susan talking about older donors. So she's encountered senior women who are reluctant to change their planned gift in their estate planning because they don't want to kind of go back on their word with their late husbands. So is there a tactful way to encourage these women to be generous without encouraging disloyalty? Which is a tough question.
I think, and Lindsay might speak to this a little better, but I do think that anytime someone loses a spouse, those documents need to be revisited because dynamics change, things change in there. And I always encourage folks to jump in and go see one of our estate planning attorneys that is on the board. Leslie and I both kind of have a similar agreement there in that we always provide 3 names when someone needs an advisor and give them the opportunity to reach out and see who they click with. But I think it's an opportunity for them to update. But Lindsay might be able to speak to it as well.
Yeah, so they've kind of laughed at me around my office. Right now I have several surviving spouses who have survived by 10, 15 years, each of whom I worked with while their husbands were still alive, all of whom the husbands told me, make sure she's taken care of, and they each feel intense loyalty to, their husband. Would he approve of this decision? Would he? And I think, potentially directing them to other advisors who are considered neutrals, like your estate planner or something like that, can be a good opportunity, because I don't have a personal interest in getting a gift for St. Jude or Methodist or whomever. And I can say, well, you know what? Remember the things and I can help them see how what they're changing isn't really inconsistent with what their husband would have wanted. I think that's where you kind of have to thread the needle to say, you can still effectuate your husband's intent, but he probably didn't think about the fact that 15 years would have passed and that this child is now independently wealthy and that you've become very involved in this organization. And he would be, so thrilled to know that you had found this, the mission of this organization that made you feel connected. And he couldn't have predicted sort of how we got to be where we are, but that's not necessarily inconsistent with what he would have wanted.
Good answer.
I had one comment about that on a real donor, several donors I've worked with. When they have been fairly far out from the death of their husband and they realize that they need or would like more income, those are the times when they can consider other types of gifts. But it's almost like they have to have an understanding of the estate and really how it's laid out, and they have to take time to figure that out. And once they figured it out with people like Lindsay, their CPA, the various advisors that they have, you and say, I'd really like to do a charitable gift annuity. I like the idea of getting an income from that. Or I want to do one for my children. So it does come, but it takes time, and advisors are the key.
Thanks, Leslie. So jumping back into our presentation here, I want to speak a little bit to your board. They make up so many of our best and most loyal donors. Generally speaking, occasionally you have the son of a donor that you asked to be on the board after his dad passed, or you have a CPA on board to fill a role in a small organization. But for the most part, your board makes up some of your most loyal donors who are so invested in your work. And it's so important to have not just your president or executive director on board with Plan Giving work, but also to find that champion on the board that wants to help you drive your work in Plan Giving. I don't think it's a stretch to say that most of you should be able to spend 5 or 10% of your time in working with donors to explore Plan Giving opportunities. And I think most executive directors who know how impactful those gifts can be are going to be supportive of that. Again, we've said it once before, but Plan Giving is a long strategy. It's not an ask. It's not an ask. There are going to be times where, you know, it is appropriate to say, have you considered leaving us in your estate plan? But for the most part, it's learning about them and continuing to educate them on your work and how impactful future gifts can be long after they're gone. Leslie, do you have anything to add to that, or Lindsay?
I think the only thing I would add to it is that patience pays off. And it is the long haul. This is not a race, it's a marathon. So you are taking a lot of time with these donors, and it's worth it in the end for outright gifts that are planned, and also the ultimate gift, the legacy.
So before we start with this slide, a question just came in, really for Lindsay. So as an estate planning attorney, how do you help, for example, a church set up a Plan Giving program and provide the ongoing education to the nonprofit's board, but then avoid conflict of interest if donors have been sent to you for estate planning services?
Well, I think there can be both. It depends on in what capacity. If I represent the board, in other words, if I've represented the board for some formal purpose, then I may or may not could do a representation of a specific board member. So it just depends on the particular organization and how involved. It's rare in my practice that I would actually represent a board. It's more likely that I would sort of help, potentially do education for the board and things like that. And then I could assist individual board members with their estate plan, because that's not anything, that's not a conflict. Now, if I actually represent the board, potentially there are some conflict issues, but it's more likely that what I'm providing to the board is education. I mean, I tell people all the time, the vast majority of what I do is education, which is not really what I thought I would be doing when I finished law school, but it's teaching clients about estate planning. It's helping clients figure out how they can, they tell me what they want and I try to help them figure that out, but I can't help them figure that out without some level of education. So a lot of times my involvement with a board might be, education, or putting them in touch with somebody who can help them. Hey, this church over here, recently ramped up their Plan Giving department or Plan Giving portion of their organization. So why don't we put the two of y'all in touch and things like that. So it's more about building relationships and helping provide education than it is necessarily representation of the board where it would lead to a conflict.
Great, thanks so much. Okay, back to Joey.
Leslie, you got this one, or you want me to take it?
I'll do it. I'm fine.
Okay.
So what needs to be in place? We've already talked about our board. Joey's gone through that quite a bit. Our volunteers. This is sometimes an overlooked group that is one of the most committed groups to your organization. We always think of time, talent, and treasure. the 3 ways that we can give. And these volunteers are giving of their time and their talent, and they are ultimately the ones that could give of their treasure because they know your organization inside and out. They are walking the halls, they are meeting the people that work in your organization, they're helping you if you have local events every year. They're the ones manning those events. And so it makes sense that when we market planned gifts, as we're looking at our prospects, we're looking at our board as our prospects, our volunteers, of course, our staff. In order for us, those of us who are committed to our organizations, we have to be willing to give in order to get gifts from donors. So we have to make our own commitment because someone is going to ask you, have you made a commitment at some point? And you really want to be in the position of saying, yes, I have. And then that's why I feel so strongly about it. And another thing I wanted to mention on this one is dedicating yourself to an organization that you firmly believe in for a length of time, giving it a long tenure, will go a long way in making your planned giving program and your own work successful. So it may be that hopefully many of you are in organizations that you firmly believe in and you've been in for a long time. But getting that commitment from the staff to stay there and grow with the organization is incredible, and it will reap benefits that you would never believe. We talked about current planned gift donors. We're going to talk about legacy societies later, but I did see one organization that had their legacy society online, and they had a little asterisk by their deceased donors, but they kept their deceased donors on the legacy society. We have a legacy wall at St. Jude. I'm sure many of you have a place that you honor your legacy donors, and Joey will talk about that. Again, we're looking for our prospects. A current planned gift donor is the best prospect for another planned gift, believe it or not. They're going to do another one if it's, they'll plan another gift. Repeat annual donors in general, middle class. And then finally, there's a book, and it's entitled, if you haven't read it, The Millionaire Next Door. And it is, I think Joey and I said, if we had one book that we would read or encourage everyone to read, it is that book, because it basically tells you, don't judge a book by its cover. And when you don't, you end up getting gifts from people that you never thought would get, or even, just don't judge people, and, let them develop them and work with them and cultivate them and steward them, and they will make amazing gifts. Joey, do you have anything?
No, excuse me. Millionaire Next Door is a must read for anyone in development, executive directors and down. It really, really is a great book. You can grab it on Amazon. Highly recommend it.
We talked a lot about this one earlier in our session, and so the 55 and older, I think Lindsay mentioned that number, the age could be dropping. They're actually younger people that are making planned gifts or outright planned gifts. And then I wanted just to focus on something that I found that was very interesting to basically expand upon when we say people create and update wills at major life events. when you're married, I'm just going to give a few of them. When you have a birth of your first, second, third, however many children, the death of someone in your life, maybe it's a parent, maybe it's someone that you provided for a gift for in your estate or a plan. A health crisis can actually make us look at our estate and figure out, how we should have our funds managed and where they should go. Moving to another state, big changes. A change in an asset's value. What if you go through a divorce? The birth of your grandchild or grandchildren, and then tax laws. We've been hearing a lot about in our session about tax laws and how they change, and I know from talking with Lindsay that she's busy as she can possibly be because of all these changes. And then also our changes in our charitable goals. I did make a note that men plan and women execute, because we have talked over and over about women outliving men and them being in control of these estates. So a lot of us are going to want to focus on them when we start working, as we're working in our program.
And just
Joey,
to piggyback,
are you going to piggyback? Okay.
Leslie, just to piggyback on what you said, that's probably one of the most common questions that I get is when should I update my estate plan? And the answer that I always give is there's no magic number of years. Things might be the exact same for you as they were 15 years ago. It's those life events, marriage, death, divorce, birth, all of those life events are when people have it top of their mind. So it may not be, we talked earlier, updating the estate plan after the death of the spouse. It might not be, 60 days. It might not be 4 months, but that's when you start thinking about those things. Death of someone close to you where you think, oh, this person had their affairs in order and I don't. And I think, they've kind of mentioned in terms of the pandemic, and we'll cover this a little bit more later, so many more, it might not be a personal health crisis, it might be a global health crisis. When we first started the pandemic, sort of back in March, our phones were ringing constantly with people saying, I've been meaning to do this for forever, and now what if I get the coronavirus and I die and I haven't made these provisions? Another interesting thing that I've gotten very recently is for all these college students who have turned 18, their parents no longer have the ability to make medical decisions for them, nor do they have the ability to access their medical records. So if their child is off at college and gets COVID, they say, well, I don't, how am I going to be able to contact the doctor and find out how they are? So I think keeping in mind that those changes in the life of your donor are what trigger them to, be thinking about these types of issues.
I thought of another one, Lindsay, and I'm just going to throw it out there for major gifts. If someone says, I'm going to sell my business, I'm getting ready to do some, I'm going to change the ownership of my business and try to back out of my business, that is so big and so huge. Or I'm about to retire.
So when talking about prospect identification, three of the big categories that all of us that work in plan giving kind of identify with most are donors that are single, our donors that are widowed, and our donors that are heirless. All of those, as you can imagine, single folks, no spouse. Age, I don't think is a factor with individuals that are single. Prior to Elizabeth and I getting married, you know, I had a part of my retirement account going to the organizations that I support. And so many people, regardless of age, set that up early on, you know, first job, second job, where you have to designate where those funds go, where that insurance policy goes. And organizations are a great way to give, as you all well know. Widowed and heirless, again, that is such important information to have in your database. It's just as important as a date of birth, really and truly, because they're the ones that you should be marketing and calling to check on and going to visit at their home. And it's again, a long game. You may visit with 10, 15 donors in person before you cross that bridge and have the ability to bring up planned giving or have them bring up planned giving. But in the end, it's someone you ask. It really is. And I'm going to speak to advisors in a few slides. I'm going to hold off on that. Leslie, do you have anything to add?
I don't know if there's a way to put a gold star on a donor prospect, but if they are heirless, they have no children, and they say, you are my #1 charity, those are the people that are in the golden circle of people that you need and get in front of, stay in front of.
Did you want to mention the advisors or go to the next slide?
No, I'm going to talk about advisors in a minute. Go ahead and.
Let me unmute. What needs to be in place when we do promotion, marketing, and education? So depending on the size of your organization and if you have a printing budget and how much planned giving work you do, you can actually buy brochures. You can purchase brochures from Sharp Company or any of the Pantera, any of the planned giving consultants. And you can actually have them personalized so that maybe you get 50 brochures, just depending on the size of your program. If you have a large program, you may print your own materials. But by all means, have something that is current that you can give to a person for them to read on their own and highlight various things in that brochure. One of the pages that I always turn the corner down on is the page that lists the wording for a bequest to your organization, which is key. Newsletters. Most of us have newsletters or some type of booklet that we send to our donors routinely just to tell them about our work. It's really a great idea to always have an article. Maybe you're featuring a donor who the best way to share planned giving ideas is through an example. Oh, I just met with a donor who planned her will, and she was able to earmark it for our educational program. We've got, or our seminar that we're putting on, and she was so pleased to be able to do that. This will happen every year thanks to her gift in the future. And then somebody else may say, oh, well, how can I do something like that? But if you mention in your newsletter a story about someone, and always make it a different type of planned gift so that they are thinking of different ways to give to you. Postcards. I actually call this a buck slip. And just a little two-sided butt slip. And you may, in the fall, focus on gifts of securities. We know that this is getting ready. This is giving season, high giving season right now through the end of the year. So you have your DTC wire information, who to contact if they want to make a gift of stock, and you just put that in your acknowledgement letters, anything that you're sending out to a certain level of donor, or a certain type of donor pool that you have identified with your prospects. Ads, if you've got a booklet or a magazine, the inside back cover is just an excellent place to, again, to have that donor story featured. Or please remember, this is our Legacy Society. We'd love to invite you to become a part of our Legacy Society, whatever it is that you want to focus on for that quarter or that year. Even in your annual report, that's a wonderful place to put something that mentions Plan Giving. You cannot mention it enough. And you have to let people, I think that Lindsay said, we need to let people know that we
Lindsay froze for me, so
Yeah,
sorry, Leslie.
Yeah, to piggyback on Leslie, it's, for those of you that don't have a Plan Giving budget and are just building this into your programs and your organization, the three easiest things and most cost effective, I believe, are going to be on your remit envelope, have a box. Have a simple box that the donor can check to say, I'd like more information on how to leave a gift in my state to support the Dixon or the Orpheum. The other one is in your newsletter. The newsletter, I have my information on every single one of our newsletters talking about to discuss, leaving a gift in your state to support the Methodist Healthcare Foundation. Please contact Joey and I have my cell and email address there. And the third is your website. You're really doing yourself a disservice if you're putting all your eggs into annual giving, major gifts, and grant work, and you don't have something about Plan Giving. Plan Giving is a vehicle to give. It's a very important vehicle. And even if you don't have a breakdown of the types of gifts, have Plan Giving on there as an option. Have your language on how to leave a gift in your estate plan and the name of your organization and address, because that's what they need to take to Lindsay and their estate planning attorneys. That's what they need to put on the beneficiary line on an IRA or an insurance policy. Those three things, even if you're not talking to donors about Plan Giving, just putting it out there will start up some conversation eventually. It may not be immediate because it is a slow process, but having it out there will get people thinking about it. And the sooner you put it out there, the sooner folks, that are younger, they're going to see it for 15 or 20 years. And when it comes time and the kids move off or get married, they're going to go, well, what are we going to do with this? And well, Methodist Healthcare Foundation has been pushing Plan Giving and leaving a gift in their estate in their newsletter for the last 15 years. Why don't we talk to the person there? Again, just really simple ways to put that information out.
Yeah, and Joey, I would also encourage you, on your website, make it very easy for someone to find how to leave a gift, any gift language, and who to contact if you have any questions. I had a client within the last 2 years who wanted to leave something to his university. It was a very small university. I had never heard of it, didn't even know where it was, but it was very easy for me. And he said, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me with this? But I want to leave them X dollars. And I said, sure, I'll be happy to. I went to their website. I got the name and phone number of the person to contact, and he, called, left him a message. He called me back within 24 hours. I have had other cases where it has not been nearly that easy. And keep in mind that some of your donors are not super web proficient, so it needs to be, easy to find on your website, who to contact, how to do it, and just what needs to be done. It doesn't have to be complicated or anything like that.
Welcome back, Leslie. I think we can go next if she doesn't have anything to add.
The one thing I was going to add was the visit part that Joey and I talked about yesterday. And this is something that I was taught by Robert F. Sharp Sr. He, the personal visit, and Joey, did you cover a lot about the personal visit before I do this?
I didn't know. I didn't really speak to that. I talked a little bit about those, the website and newsletters and remit envelope as just being really easy places to incorporate plan giving that aren't going to cost you a lot and not take a ton of effort.
Well, if I was to pick one thing on this page that is the most important thing that any of us can do, and Lindsay has talked about this, Joey's talked about this, the personal visit is where it all happens. That body language, being in the donor space, being in their office, being in their home, seeing the pictures, seeing what's important to them, and really getting a sense of who they are. And it's really critical. I think that one of the things that we've done and that I've done is to have personal visit goals. A lot of times it's easy when you've got lots of hats, and many of you on this call wear many hats. Set aside time for your personal visits when we're able to do it again. This will make a difference in your organization's security of the planned gift that someone has provided for you, because they are less likely to take you out of their will or out of their plan if you are visiting with them and they get to know you. And this is where those relationships really become very solid. And one of the things I do as I begin the very first visit is I gather, and this is what he taught me. He taught me the 5 Ps. Who are the people in their lives? What are their names? What are their ages? Who's important to them? What is the property that they own? And I will ask during a visit, do you mind if I take notes? I want to remember what you say. And they usually say, of course not. So I get a piece of paper because you won't remember it. You can't remember all of this. And
Yeah, Leslie keeps freezing. Sarah, do you want to move to the next slide? And I'll jump on it. And
Yes, and it's also important to note personal visits are hard now with the pandemic. So
most of us have kind of altered our what qualifies as a personal visit, and if you haven't, you should. Those meaningful conversations on the phone, using Zoom as a platform to visit with your donors. Believe it or not, those 70 and 80 are in most cases way more savvy than we are with these with all of this. So if you haven't pivoted and switched over and started to recognize some of those meaningful phone calls, do talk to your leadership about that. So on the promotion, marketing, and education side, again, steady messaging is the way to go for plan giving. The more you can get this information and how a legacy gift will impact your work in front of your donors, the more successful the program is going to be. Again, it's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. a slow game. And occasionally you may have somebody on the first visit that says, hey, I want to give X amount of dollars in my estate or retirement accounts to your cancer program or this education program. But you may also have people on the opposing side that you visit with for 3 or 4 years that never tell you anything about their gift. And stewardship is key. So many of these donors and who raise their hands and tell us that we are in their estate plans, it's our duty to steward the heck out of them and make sure that we are in the last estate plan. So many organizations let that go and say, oh, well, Leslie made a gift to support our work, so we can stop calling her. She finally did it. That is not donor-centric at all. You want to be in that last document. You want to keep up with their lives as well. Dan at the University of Memphis was one of the best on the stewardship side. When I first met him, I remember him telling a few examples about how one of his donors' grandkids had a home run at a local high school baseball game, and he saw the article and recognized the name and cut out the article and mailed it to his donor. That's a huge touch. I mean, donors remember that stays with them for a long time. And if you can touch your donors' major gift, annual gift, plan giving in any way like that, it's going to carry over for them, and they're going to remember you. Again, put the bequest and legal name and address somewhere. Don't hide it. It's not secret information. Your 990 is public record for anyone that wants it. There's no reason to hide that anywhere. It needs to be out there as often as you can. Give people access to it. And the last little bit is our advisors in this community are so important to our work. When I started with Salvation Army, I spent about 30% of my time getting in front of CPAs, estate planning attorneys, trust officers, folks at the community and Jewish Foundation, and telling them about our work. They are huge resources to our donors as well. We are advisors to our donors when you look at it in a big lens, just like the estate planning attorneys and the CPAs are. We are providing them with a service, and having those advisors as friends of ours is so beneficial to answer questions, to connect them when they need it, when they need an attorney or need advice, or to update documents. So you'll get a surprise gift every once in a while. My second or third year there, I met with a local estate planning attorney, and the next day he called and said, hey, Joey, I've got a client who is really upset with the organization that was supposed to get a third of her estate, and she'd like to come tour the Salvation Army shelter downtown. And I said, great, I'll contact her, took her for a tour. A few days later, he sent me an email and said, send your language. You're looking at a $2 million gift in her estate. Keep her on your radar. And keep in mind, that doesn't happen every day, but those relationships, as you nurture and steward your advisors, they're going to look out for you just like you look out for them. So I really encourage everybody to reach out to the Lindsays and Mike Adams. And I mean, take them to coffee, take them to lunch. They won't say no. They might take a minute, but they will get you on the calendar, and they want to hear about your work, and they want to be a partner with you. And if you need a resource, I'm happy to share. I exhausted myself trying to visit with everyone that had estate planning on their website early in my career, and I recommend not doing that. I've got a list of about 10 estate planning attorneys in the city that are the best at what they do, and they focus in estate planning and tax law, and they want to do what's best for our donors. They ask the right questions. You know, they talk about family, but they also say, what charities do you support in your life, and would you consider making them some residual of your estate down the road? And all attorneys do not do that, I assure you. And but again, feel free to reach out to me if you'd like a list of those guys. Leslie, do you have anything to add to this? No. Next, please, Sarah.
Yes, and I'll add, I work at the Jewish Foundation of Memphis, and we have a professional advisory group. And so I'm also happy to recommend any one of the advisors that we personally work with, and have had great experiences with, Lindsay Jones of Wiseman Bray, she's not, and anyone, you can't go wrong. So we can share that list. Okay, recognition societies.
Yeah, so this is the exciting part when once you secure those gifts and you start to build a list. It's so important, especially we all like to be a part of something, and our older population is just, they love being a part of societies and seeing their name in an annual report. I will say, approach this with some caution and with your board, have discussions. You want to be very careful who you name the society after. Honor those founding members. They're so important. Honor them in their life, honor them after they've passed with an asterisk or some sort, so that people know that the Hardens supported you in their estate plan. That's not something you want to forget. They chose to make a gift at some point in their life. Remembering that gift and always recognizing it is so important. Again, as it says, take the donor's word for it. A lot of us use donor intent forms, but donor intent forms can be tricky. I've always made note of when somebody told me, when a donor has said, hey, you're in here for X. I always make note of it. The discussion about and really bringing that donor intent form to the table is only advisable when that relationship is that strong, where you feel comfortable saying, hey, can you commit to this so that my leadership knows of your commitment? Because they see their estate plans as their formal commitment, and signing something else could shake things up a little bit. So I do say proceed with caution on donor intent forms. And any special gifts for those folks. I try to visit my plan giving donors twice a year. All of my little old ladies, I take to dinner at Christmas every year, or I take to lunch at Christmas every year, whichever's best for them. Just getting out of the house to spend time with someone is such a treat for them. I update them on the program. I talk about their plans for the holidays. It's a great closing piece for me for the end of the year. And then I check in on them. Right now, I'm calling my plan giving folks specifically that have committed to a gift. I'm calling them about every 45 days to check in, see if they need anything. I've dropped off groceries. I've done just anything little that can be meaningful to that donor, to let them know that we have not forgotten about them, and that we are continuing our work. Also, one of the biggest things with any recognition society is getting permission from the donor. Don't assume that they want their name on a website or an annual report, because a lot of folks don't. A lot of our donors will raise their hand and tell you once that relationship is established that they have a gift there. But do get permission to include them in whatever you name that society, just like you would for an annual donor. I think that's it for societies.
I think it's my turn again. I'd like this just because I think this picture, I think Dan Merle actually put this picture in way back when, but how to bring up plan giving, kind of the elephant in the room. And we've talked about a lot of these, but as we go to the next slide, keep it simple. Your donors are normal people. They have regular lives and they don't live in the world that we do. I tell people all the time, and a lot of the feedback that I get from my clients is how effective am I at taking really complicated topics and making them in a way that they can understand. And that goes back to that education piece. It's more about why you should give, less about the how. There are plenty of people who can help you with the how, as far as the mechanics of a charitable gift annuity or a charitable lead trust or a charitable remainder trust. But that's not what the donor necessarily needs to hear. They need to hear, why should I give the organization? We can bring in advisors to help get us where we want to go, but we need them to recognize, why should you give to our organization? And then just those little reminders that we talked about, remember us in your will. A financial advisor that I work with pretty regularly, as well as, I know Dan Merle used to do this as well. Little taglines at the bottom of your email. Everybody's got the sincerely Lindsay and my address and all those kinds of things, but Dan and this other financial advisor that I work with change those pretty regularly. And so the financial advisors will say, what have you done for retirement planning today? Or, some little tagline. And I just always notice that it comes right before, that whole long thing that nobody reads. And Dan used to change those up, with some regularity. And I always thought that was, a very creative, easy, it doesn't cost you anything, but it is something that somebody will notice. And then, again, networking, building those relationships that Joey was talking about. That's actually how I met Joey. He contacted my office. At the time, I think we had 3 estate planning attorneys. He left his card, a couple things at the front desk, and said, I'd love to set up a time to, grab coffee or get together with you. But I think those relationships and that networking are what help you build your ability to connect with donors, because the more comfortable you are in having these conversations, the more likely you are to have them. So I think, and you're going to get more comfortable by being around other people that are having those same challenging conversations. I tell people, my husband tells me all the time, you talk about death more than anybody I've ever known, and you talk about it very nonchalantly. And I'm like, well, right, because that's what I do. That's part of my everyday vernacular. And so the same thing applies to plan giving. This is what you do. But this is not always what they do. And so you have to be able to connect that. And you do that through networking and just getting better with it, practicing, all of those kinds of things. And then you have other people through various networks, organization like this, who can, fill in the gaps for anything. If you don't know, you don't know. And you say, you know what, I don't know, but I've been, working with this other person who has 30 years of experience in this field. And so I'll find out and I'll get back to you. And so that's how, that networking can really help as well. All right. And so the last portion of our presentation is plan giving during a pandemic. As I mentioned earlier, certainly I have seen a renewed focus on planning, just because of the uncertainty of what might happen, and that looked different at 6 months ago than it does now. I mean, when all this started 6 months ago, we thought it might be a 3 to 4 week problem. Now, we're 6 months in and we don't really know when the end will be in sight. But I always tell people, anytime is a good time to do good planning. So whether that be, planning your estate, planning for health, planning for giving to the organizations that you support, nothing about the pandemic has changed that. The other thing I would encourage you to do is be creative. And as it may look different. We may not have personal visits to people's homes. I may not be able to take clients to dinner and those kinds of things. But there are ways that I can still build on those relationships and continue to steward those donors. So a couple of examples that I've seen of this. One, football around here is a huge deal. And so I've heard of a couple of universities, and most of their programs, you have to contribute some certain amount each year in order to be eligible to buy the tickets. Well, this year, they still obviously want you to make those contributions, but you can't due to the pandemic, there's obviously not nearly as much seating available. So a couple of organizations that I've heard of are offering, please go ahead and make your donation. Due to the pandemic, we're not sure that we're going to be able to provide you seats depending on your level of giving, but we've set up this wall where if you make your donation, you're going to get a brick in the wall or some other recognition to recognize your gift. We love your support of our organizations. We hope we're going to be, back raring to go next year with SEC football. So that's a great, creative way to do something different, still get those gifts that you're wanting. And then the other thing that I saw, I've gotten in the same sort of, still talking about football. My daughter is a cheerleader for Briarcrest. And so same thing, got to sit 12 feet apart and there's all these restrictions. So the number of people that can attend the game is very, very limited. Well, there's a little building at their school that overlooks, it's clear, and it kind of overlooks the football field that they've used for special things like the homecoming court and things like that. And this year they're auctioning off tickets. They've got them socially distanced, so in groups of like 6, to get this preferred seating, and all of that goes towards their endowment. So it's not costing the university anything. It's not costing Briarcrest anything, but it's just an additional way to say, hey, we've separated out since we can't have as many people. We know so many of you support our booster club and this, that, and the other. And so you can go in and auction to get one of these pods for, the homecoming game or whatever. So again, be thinking of creative ways that you can do different things and virtual ways to plan. Like Joey said, connect with your donors via Zoom. If they don't do Zoom, connect with them via FaceTime. Most of them, even older donors, know how to FaceTime because their grandchildren FaceTime them. So there are a lot of different ways that you can still do that. And certainly keep in mind that they are thinking about these things probably more than they have in recent history, just because this is unknown to everyone. All right, and then on the last slide, we've got, there's a resources slide, but on the last slide, when we look at these challenges that are a result of the pandemic, limited technology or accessibility. Some people don't have good accessibility. There are still those clients who, can't really do much with the computer, or you're not allowed to go into a senior living facility. Communication issues like we've seen today, sometimes internet goes out when you're in the middle of a Zoom call, or you have a bad connection. All of those things are the reality of the world that we're living in. And so, yes, are there communication issues? Of course. The market, huge instability in the market. We had a huge drop, then we had a huge gain. And so it just has been a lot of market instability. And then, of course, fear and anxiety about the future. I don't know what the future holds. And so that makes me more reluctant to, commit to your organization or think about a planned gift. But as I was putting together this list and I looked back through them, I thought, is this really any different? I mean, it might look different on the front, on paper, but are those really any different challenges when we talk about planning and we talk about plan giving? Hasn't communication with your donors, hasn't that always been sort of top of mind, and haven't there always been certain impediments to that? Maybe it wasn't a global pandemic, but it was probably, there are some challenges in terms of communicating with the donor. How do I bring up these topics and things like that? Fear and anxiety about the future. This probably is not the first time, clients have historically always worried, am I going to run out of money? What happens if my portfolio drops? What happens? All of those kinds of things. So it might be a little heightened at this point, but it's really not that much different. And so the means, the way that we're going to do it may be different, but I don't think the underlying message is necessarily any different, because we have the same opportunities and we have the same challenges that we have had, for the last several decades. So it looks a little bit different potentially, but the core issues are really still the same. Your organization, what its mission is, the commitment of your donors to your organization, and your ability to communicate with them and establish that relationship so that they're comfortable discussing these things with you, moving towards a planned gift. And then, you know, ultimately the benefit is still the same, which is supporting and promoting your organization, which is that's why they're talking to you to begin with. And then on the last couple of slides, we've got some additional resources. Certainly, for those of you who are not members, we'd love to have you as members of our organization. The local council, the local only membership is $125 each year, and it includes all the programming. Historically, it has included the lunches for the program as well. So we're sort of working towards making sure we have quality programs, since we're not getting lunch, so we can't feed you so much. And if you have any questions about that, certainly let any of us know. Get in touch with our other board members. The second program will be a different set of board members, so that'll give you, you know, an opportunity to get to know other people involved in the organization as well. And certainly, you know, as I said at the beginning, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or anyone else that's on the panel with any questions or concerns.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions with about 10 minutes left. The first one was about legacy societies from Wesley, and wants to know, how do you book planned gifts without a statement of intent or other documentation? We welcome donors to the Column Society when they make a verbal commitment, but only book documented gifts. And I can answer this, or Joey or Leslie if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably different for everybody, Wesley. It's the short answer is you don't. I don't think any organizations will let you without some sort of communication. I know when I was with the Salvation Army, I had 3 options to book a gift. I could have my donor intent form. I could have a full copy of their estate plans or their will, or I could have their entire inventory of their estate. And 2 of those are pretty far-fetched, I think, for most organizations to get handed a document like that. Occasionally, I'll get a copy of the will, or at least the pages that I'm included in. Outside of the donor intent form, we do recognize gifts that come through an advisor. As Lindsay said, when she has permission to let an organization know, she does. But again, those are very few as well, I would think. But I can book if Lindsay sends me an email and says, "Hey, your client X that you were aware of has made a gift in their estate for this and has authorized me to let you know." I guess in the rare occurrence that happens, but it does happen.
Sarah, do you want to talk to this? I definitely have some ideas.
Well, I was going to say, so the Jewish Foundation, we have a legacy society for 10 Jewish organizations that we support. So they're not actually, you know, giving money to us at the Jewish Foundation. You know, it's one of the 10 nonprofits in Memphis. And we actually have 2 different types of paperwork. I definitely suggest you create some sort of documentation if you don't have it. I find it very, very helpful in terms of record keeping and just, you know, as I'm sure Lindsay as an attorney, everything's better in paper. So we have 2 steps, you know, one is intent and one is commitment, right? Intent is, okay, I do want to give a gift, but I don't know how, right? Do I want to do it from a donor advised fund? Do I want to do it, you know, from my will, from a part of my 401k? How? I don't know. I haven't met with my attorney yet. I haven't met with a CPA. I don't really know. So that's sort of the first step. And then the second step is, okay, I've met with my advisor. I know that this is what I want to do, and I can change my checkbox from TBD to, okay, I've left a bequest, or, you know, I've updated, you know, who's going to get part of my donor advised fund after I pass. So I definitely recommend paperwork. And then, like I said, you know, we have 2 sets of paperwork for that reason, because donors aren't going to know right at the top of the head, especially when you meet with them for the first time. Oh yes, I just met with my attorney and it's in my will already. You know, that's never really going to happen, at least from my experience. So that would be my answer.
So what we do, we have both. So we would have a legacy society, our Danny Thomas St. Jude Society. We have a form that if you want to have your plaque on the wall and you want to have your name in the recognition booklet, you fill out the form and say, you don't have to give a lot of particulars, but you mention that I have included, and most people write life insurance, or they'll tell you what they're planning. They sign that form, and that gives us permission, and they can check a box. You can use my name in your publications, or I prefer to remain anonymous. So they can select. Now that is for the legacy wall. For the campaign, we have a commitment form, and it basically outlines their commitment. And usually, a lot of times it's an outright gift, but I've been working on several that are blended gifts. So you have a form of their estate, maybe their retirement plan, and you also have some outright giving during their lifetime to make the one big gift. But we outline all of that on the commitment form, and they sign it. And in order to get 100% credit, you have to be over the age of 70. But if you are younger, like between 55 and 70, then there is a calculation, a present value calculation made on what the real value is right now for that gift. So
Great. And that's another good idea, life insurance. I forgot to mention that, but that's a very common vehicle that we've seen for people to leave a planned gift.
And one last thing is for you folks that are new to plan giving, or just, you know, wanting to jump into plan giving, do recognize every commitment you get, regardless of the amount. I think it goes without saying, but you know, you can have a donor that might commit a couple $1,000s from, you know, their retirement account. Have enthusiasm with them, just like you did for the folks that committed $500,000. It works wonders. It's good for everyone, and there's a high probability that increases with stewardship as time goes on.
And I think we have time for one more question, which is from Anne, and she wanted more specifics on how you bring up a planned gift when you're with a donor. So I know we said keep it simple, but if maybe Leslie or Joey or Lindsay, probably from the nonprofit side.
I think it's all pretty situational, and just being receptive to your donors and where they are in their life. And I work in major gifts and plan giving for Methodist, so I have several business cards and several signatures set up on my email, and you know, I identify as, you know, plan giving coordinator with Methodist when I call about and want to, you know, I guess start discussions with that prospect. Also listen for cues from the donors. I just updated my estate plans for the first time since my husband died, or my wife died. Those are good cues to really step in and say, well, have you considered leaving a gift to support us in your estate plan? Or we have several donors who've made gifts to support our work in their estate plans. Is this something you might consider? There's lots of opportunity. Again, and sometimes you won't feel comfortable bringing it up for a visit or 2 or 5. But being receptive to where that donor is so important in the process. And Leslie's probably got a lot to add to that.
So here's one of my key things that I do when I've been working with a prospect. Now, I do a lot of this when I'm in the hospital, but I can also do it with a magazine that has a planned giving article in it. Okay? So I'm in a visit or I'm doing a tour and I take them to the legacy wall. It's on part of our tour. And I'm just saying, I want you to see the Danny Thomas St. Jude Society legacy wall. This is where our donors have made commitments through their estate. And you mentioned the various gifts. And their names are on the wall if they would like to be recognized. And I cannot tell you how many times a donor will turn to me and go, well, I have you in my will, or I have a trust. Just seeing other people are doing what they have done, just they come out with it. And I go, well, I didn't know that. This is wonderful news. We'd love to have your name on the wall. And then I can get them all of the information. And then throughout the time that we know each other, they may or may not share the extent of what they've done. Or I'd like to plan a gift like that. And one of the things that has happened, and I know that Joey, everybody on this call, on this panel has happened. You are in their home, you have worked with them for a while, and you're talking and they say, recently I did something really important. I remember I put you in my will. And they will tell you, and they will say, I've got something to share with you. And it's almost like you've done the cultivation, you've done it over and over again. You've told them, oh, the other thing is I always tell them what I do. Well, I work with people who plan their gifts. They plan their gifts through a bequest, a life insurance policy, and I don't leave it in the background. I basically am really upfront about what I do. And I go, I love to work with our donors and help them realize their dreams and help St. Jude or whatever institution you represent. You know, just be out there with it. Because once you tell them what you do, they may follow along with you, you know, if they're inclined.
Thank you, Leslie. Real fast, can you say what the 5 Ps are? Frank is asking.
I'm so sorry that I didn't get to finish. So because it was Bob Sharp Sr., it was important. So it's the people, the property you own, the plans you want to make and you have, the planners who help you, the philanthropies that you support, because most estates have more than one philanthropy. And then I added a 6th one for the pets. Because how many times do you get out of a meeting and you go, what was the name of their dog or their cat? So if you write it down, you can always ask about that. And then you know if they're heirless and they don't have children, you know the people, it's just me and my husband.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. It's 1 o'clock. I just left on the screen our next session, which will be on September 30th at 11 a.m. If you haven't signed up for it, please do. We'll be going into more details with other board members of the Planned Giving Council of the Mid-South on the life of a planned gift. And if you have any questions that you were not able to get answered, you can email any one of us. I'm the one that sent out the Zoom link. Feel free just to reply to that email and I will make sure your question is answered. Thank you so much for joining and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, and thanks, Sarah, for moderating.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye,
Great job,
everyone.
Sarah.